Good afternoon. This is Kade Wells, the Wizard Wells, coming to you from East Middle School in the Harrisburg district, very near the city of South Dakota. Practically the same thing. Harrisburg, Sioux Falls, they're touching. I'm going to talk today about how to use your kids' Dungeons and Dragons characters to write a backstory. It's been really effective. It was cool this year. Their characters are very neat. We've just been so busy. I think just because I got more kiddos in a room at a time, and just I've been doing nothing but grading and building and grading and building and laminating things and maps for stuff and things. I got 27 seventh graders this year, and have somehow successfully trained them all to play Dungeons and Dragons. They've started their Lost Mines of Phandelver adventure. I've got 4 very good DMs that have done well at training, and they get together during the course of the week during a free period to discuss, where they're going with the campaign and little details so that they're all prepared. And I couldn't be more proud of them. That's a great godsend. Last year, it was difficult to get DMs to do much of anything, and we all know how that works out. So yeah, very fortunate this year in my 7th grade class, though it's very large. We've managed to be very successful at it. And so I'm eager to see how it progresses. My principal, awesome man, Mr. Fessler, has been coming in to help facilitate with the 7th graders learning. My 8th graders, many of which I've played before, but the 7th graders with Mr. Fessler in the room to just help me help them. I think it's really been very cool just to see what happens in a classroom when you have the proper administrative support. And he and I both recognized that we could see our kids go from here in their cognitive level to just almost overnight. You could feel the rise in what their brain does when they're doing the D&D activity. So just really, really cool. You can literally just see it happen. So I have a head to toe description that I did last year. I think that one's fine. You like that, do that. That's what my kiddos start with all the time. I'm being finally freed up away from grading for a moment. I thought I'd go ahead and blast one of these out. So you had the head to toe description, the character creation, of course, that facilitates that. And then my kid did the backstory as we're nearing the end of The Hobbit here. So I just want to share some resources and materials and ideas with you. None of this is groundbreaking, revolutionary stuff, but perhaps it will help one day. And that's, again, of course, all I want to do. All right, so the instructions are pretty simple, and that's where to start, of course. Character, backstory, call to adventure. In the curriculum, that's the beginning of the year, and it is for a lot of 8th graders. My kiddos are 7th grade advanced kids, so they learn the 8th grade material, and the call to adventure is really common in that vein. So it's just very similar to the head to toe description. And keep in mind that they keep going back to text to do these things. Okay, so first thing I say as character backstory, call to adventure, title. First thing is their race and ethnicity. Are they a dwarf, a dragonborn? I just listed them, right? That's all I did. Remind them of, oh yeah, that's what I am. Because remember, we're still early in the year, and though I have many kiddos who absolutely love D&D already, I have a lot that are still kind of shaking off the cobwebs. Okay, so then I go into some detail and just ask, who are their parents? Where are they born? Big city, small village, farm, deep in the forest, in the mountains, etc. What was their childhood like? Are their parents still present? If not, where are they? And I mentioned here, don't always be an orphan or whatever, because it's really cliche. Now, what I did here and why is they don't know. Well, we play in Faerun, which makes the most sense because it's got so many materials available. But my kiddos don't know that. They don't know anything about, the High Road. They don't know anything about Neverwinter or, Baldur's Gate or Waterdeep or anything. So instead of having them worry and fret, because they will, about like, Mr. Wells, I don't know any big cities, just make one. Okay, but I use the big city as Neverwinter because we use that regional map. That's the biggest city in the area. If they're really privy to doing research, then I can say, okay, look up some stuff about Baldur's Gate or Waterdeep. Otherwise, a small village, wherever you want to put it on the map, is fine. So that helps facilitate the beginning, so they can think about it in a general way as to conceptualizing a story. You don't need to know the whole story to write the story. Where do they live? What was their childhood like? Okay. Then I tell them I'd highly recommend rereading the information from your race in the player's handbook to help inform these decisions and make the home life of your past that makes sense. I tell them it's not the expectation that you'll know everything about Dwarven or Elven society, but it's easy enough to get the information from the PHB and make inferences for your own story using the text. Okay, so I mean, that makes sense to everybody. But here again, you have a kiddo who is engaged in a writing activity that's creative by nature, but it's rooted in informational text. So in order to achieve success at it, they pretty much have to go back in and reread, elf or dwarf or gnome or whatever, and get a conceptual idea of where that character would have come from. under normal circumstances, and then based on those normal circumstances, do they want to make some exceptional circumstances? For instance, a gnome was adopted by, I don't know, elves or whatever. Okay, so that brings them back to text, and that's really, really important. That's why kiddos scores are really great in my class most of the time, is that because this creative element is facilitated by informational text that has to be activated upon in order to succeed. Okay, background. I list all the backgrounds. Blah. This is, since it's just the call to adventure, if you consider like Bilbo and the dwarves come and then he leaves the house, that's his call to adventure, right? That's pretty much where their story can end. Maybe some sort of little bit of like combat or some encounter or something bad happens or something, but that's pretty much it. They don't have to go on and on with a short story, because then the short story would be a novel. This backstory is a major component of the writing, because the background is your character's past, right? Call to adventure. Who was Bilbo before he was the burglar? Well, he was pretty much, they call him a grocer, right? I think Bilbo has the noble background. I tell them reread the character's background and glean details from it that will aid in their story. Use personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws to inform them about who and what your character's past may have been. And I say, think about Bilbo, because we read The Hobbit, right? So that helps them have a concept by which to approach this. That background becomes, I mean, that helps them role play their character, of course, in class too, which is also part of what I want. And so not only do you have this writing component, then they're going to synthesize this through their character gameplay. Some better at it than others, right? Whatever. And at least then that's another piece of the brain that's working off of something that was just at one time a scholastic, assessment. And that's one of the things I have trouble with in terms of like normal school, is that assessments are just that, they're assessments and then they're gone, and the kid never thinks about them. It's not always true, of course, but when you can always bring learning back, all the educational philosophy says, of course, that's more impactful, right? Why wouldn't it be? Then I say class. Here's all the classes from the player's handbook. Reread your character class to get an indication of how they may have progressed from a common person to a heroic adventurer. That's that moment of climax in the call to adventure story. That's what it is. Again, though, reread, right? Reread. And then to give them a little bit of prompting. How do they go from their background to their character class? This will likely be a large part of the call to adventure when they are forced away or decided to go from their background. As with Bilbo, this is because of the dwarves and Gandalf. Again, so they have this example by which to use. And I waited on this. I always wait on this for a little while. I mean, we're coming up on the end of the first 9 weeks here. And it's because we were able to get almost all the way through The Hobbit at this point. So they have lots of context. They've played D&D, a couple times, different activities like I mentioned in the other video, but now they're going into their third Phandalin portion of the adventure. They're just about done with Cragmark Cave, and they'll be heading into Phandalin, which is always really interesting because kiddos do better and worse at certain things, right? So the role playing of all these different NPCs can be very difficult for some people. And Fridays are very busy for me because I'll step in to help a dungeon master, give them some modeling to help engage their players and, help make their game more fun. Because as soon as it's fun and everybody's having fun, then the game is succeeding on its own. The scores go up on their own. It literally will almost do itself at that point. But it's great effort at the beginning to make sure that everything runs smoothly. Okay. Class. And so that's it. And then here's a really simple, very stupid rubric, right? The writing has good description, showing the setting and creating a proper mood. The character's past is revealed, characterization, personality shown, as well as their call to adventure. Story has some dialogue that is grammatically correct and effective for moving the story along. You would think I wouldn't have to have that, but if you don't put it in there, they won't have any dialogue. They'll just literally write prose the whole time. It makes the story really dry. So at least a couple instances of somebody, even that, and they're like, the kids are like, oh, they're alone in the forest and they're freezing to death and starving. I'm like, okay, well, then they're talking to themselves, and the format is the same. You need some dialogue in your story. If they could talk to the stump or the squirrel or whatever, I don't care. Rich conflicts that make the story interesting and fun to read. We have a little lesson on conflict where I teach them that they can write conflicts into just about every single sentence. And I proved that with like a stormy night and a monster chasing a character where they're cold and shivering, then they start doubting themselves, and then they're starving, their stomach rolls over, and then they hear a growl from the bushes, and just in those few sentences, they saw how I was able to include all kinds of different conflicts. And I, mentioning you can literally do this in almost every sentence that you write, not to overdo it, but like they got the point, and their writing has become better already. And then the mechanics, capitalization, sentence variety, stuff and things, to full pages for this little call to adventure. And of course, many of them are 4, 5, 6 pages, right? Give them my kids. All right. While I was having them write this, I created this little sheet called Race Video Help, knowing that many of these kiddos have never been involved in a fantasy world of any kind, weren't fantasy movie watchers, didn't play video games, and never considered ever playing Dungeons and Dragons. So I put just together a list of videos, right? Given the grand nature of YouTube and all of you folks that, do this sort of thing, and how difficult it is and how much awe and inspiration I have for you. This is what I could do and put those videos together so that a kid who's a dwarf could look at a video and get a sense about dwarves in addition to the text that they read. So you're talking about multimedia differentiation, right? And a lot of the kiddos use these. I had a couple of kids that were drow, and I was like, oh, I never really thought about how much they would actually need to research in order to figure out what the drow are actually, right? I've read many of Ari Salvatore's books with Drizzt Do'Urden, and my students have not. So I thought I'll put some stuff in there about the Underdark, and there's a video about Men's and Brands. And anyway, one of my kiddos came up to me with this fantastic story, and she said, so I was thinking, she's a fighter, drow fighter, and she's like, I was thinking that my household went to another household with the mission to like assassinate the last remaining, bloodline of this particular matron's family. And she said, and then she goes into this thing. There's this big battle, and she sneaks around, and she gets into this room. She kicks the door in, and there's an infant sitting in the crib. And I think her story even starts with that moment where she kicks the door in, and she's holding the knife, and she sees this infant, and she says, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? I'm not doing this. And she leaves and feigns her death in some way. And I was just so proud of like the nuance of thought that's going into this. And she read, clearly watched the videos and stuff, and the way that she, was talking about it clearly showed understanding, and I would say almost even mastery without reading a bunch of novels. So the videos really helped. That's part of the research process of their backstory. We wouldn't think of writing a backstory as research, but using Dungeons and Dragons, it does become research, and therefore you're supporting multiple parts of the brain at the same time, which is the same thing that Dungeons and Dragons does. Just had a staff development this afternoon where piece of John Hattie's research was presented as social activities have a 0.9 effect on students, which is one of the highest. And you think about D&D and the social activity, that's one of the reasons why kids who play D&D get so smart. Okay, so just a little video help them out, give them resources to use. Don't expect them to be able to find it on their own. This is just a really cool model of the hero's journey that I found years ago. It's got all the little sub parts in it, but this is an icon that the kiddos use just so that they can kind of look back and remember the pieces. And then of course, what everything needs, what every lesson should have is a model. My model was getting kind of old, so I used one of my favorite recent characters and wrote, while they were doing it, I wrote my own. And, when they didn't need help with something specific, I just sat and wrote and wrote and wrote. And then it gives me a really good idea of how long it will take them, and some of the challenges that they might have, that sort of thing. So I know this is not profound, but D&D facilitates our job in so many ways, and it facilitates the kids' learning in so many more ways that as I get the context to really reveal to you, I always try, but it has been really crazy busy here. I mean, I just have not been as busy at the beginning of the year in probably the last 4 years. It's just been kind of on the grind. It's been really fun, and the kiddos are cool, and the trainings are going well. But in the free period where I usually make these, I now have 6th period. I used to have 2nd period, and I accrue tasks by the time I get to 6th period. So I'm always going to look at my teaching job as a priority, of course, as I should. And when I get the time to do these to help out a little bit, I will. This is the Wizard Wells signing off. Heroes backstory. Have a good day.